A reminder, a long rambling statement from the floor becomes a question if you add, what do you think of that to the end? Yes?
What's next?
What's next? Well, the next thing that's going to be published is a novella in the Little Brother universe, which always sounds very grandiose. The White House Office of Technology is running a bunch of technology challenges like the X Prize, where they're putting up cash purses for firms or individuals who build new technologies that are kind of missing from our world. And in order to get people inspired, they're working with Intel's chief futurist, a guy named Brian David Johnson, who's a great believer in something called prototyping in fiction, or design fiction, where you write fictional accounts of what the technology would do if it existed. You write exciting stories about it that inspire people to go on to make it. You know, we talk a lot about the predictive value of science fiction. I think that's just baloney. I think the way that we get it, you know, the only way you can talk about science fiction being predictive is like if you do the literary equivalent of firing a shotgun at a wall and then drawing a circle around where all the pellets went and saying, "See, it hit the target." But you know, Gene Roddenberry certainly did not predict that Motorola engineers would create a flip phone, but he inspired it. He made design fiction. So the prompt that I got from the White House and Brian was to write a story about superpowers. So I wrote a story about a quake in the East Bay on the Seneca Fault that is responded to by an upswelling of popular mutual aid, people who go to take care of each other, but that's displaced by private contractors. And the protests that follow are responded to with brutal police crackdowns, which are solved with drones that are launched by the protesters that communicate with little actuators that they wear around their ankles that tell them which way to move to avoid the police lines, and allows them the superpower of schooling like fish to avoid police lines. I don't think that's what the White House had in mind. Apparently they're going to publish it, which is pretty cool. After that, I have written a nonfiction book that my agent is currently out there blogging. I haven't heard from him lately, but I've been on tour. It's called Information Doesn't Want to Be Free. The corollary being, of course, that people do, or corollary being that people do. And it's a book about creativity and business and the internet. And Neil Gaiman and Amanda Palmer wrote introductions to it. And I'm hoping it sells, because it would be really fun. I'm sure it will. And then after that, I've been thinking about another sequel, because I never thought I would write a sequel before. It seemed like, you know, retreading old turf. I mean, the interesting thing about writing novels is discovering this whole world lurking inside your subconscious and like getting it out on paper and going, oh my goodness, who knew that was back there? It's like reaching back for a popcorn hull that was, you know, caught in a back molar and discovering an entire civilization. But revisiting it seemed a bit dull. And yet, I found when I actually wrote the book that it was like discovering that all my best friends from high school had remained friends, that they were still having awesome adventures, and that I could go hang out with them again. And so I'm thinking I might try this again. Now, 10 years ago, I came here for the launch of my first novel, Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom. This is one of the bookstores that hosted one of the launches for it. And I've been thinking that on the 10th anniversary of it, it would be pretty fun to consider a sequel or another Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom novel. So I think that's what I'm going to write next. Yeah.
If you were going to walk out of here tonight with one book that didn't have Cory Doctorow as the author, which book would it be? And why?
Which book would it be? If I were to walk out with one book that didn't have my name on it. Well, I generally don't walk out with books with my name on it. They're heavy, and I have to find room for them in my suitcase. I can just borrow them from people sitting in the front row and I need room for them. What book would I walk out with if it wasn't that? Goodness me. I mean, I'm bad at one book, right? That's why I wrote 50,000 blog posts and not one. But let me think of recent books, maybe. I really like Ramez Nam's, oh gosh, no, the title's just got into my head. Who knows? Nexus. It was a recent debut novel. I thought it was terrific. I thought it was really lovely. And then the book that won last year's Hugo is Joe Walton's Among Others, which is a beautiful novel about kind of growing up geeky, like one of the great science fiction novels about science fiction. Yes?
I own Pirate Cinema and it has a 1 on it. Will there ever be a 2?
You own Pirate Cinema and there's a 1 on it. Will there ever be a 2? You know, it's funny. That was the cover designer's idea. And it's supposed to look like the 1 in that reel that goes around at the front of a movie where you've got the 1, the 2, the 3, and then the boop. I don't plan it to, but nothing's impossible. Yes, and you, ma'am.
You mentioned that the U.S. laws around copyright devices, what have you, are not always the greatest. Is there a country that you think does it better than ours?
Unfortunately, the question is there countries that get this better than the U.S.? And unfortunately, one of the U.S.'s primary exports is stupid internet laws. So the U.S. Trade Representative has made sure that the countries that the U.S. does business with have laws that are at least as dumb as America's laws, and often laws that are dumber. And the advantage of a law that's dumber than the one that the administration can get from Congress here is that it can become a trade obligation. So you can strong-arm Australia into passing some law that no one here would ever, that the Congress would never let in, and then you can start working on Congress and going, we are out of compliance with our obligations to our Australian trading partners. We signed the treaty. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is a secretive treaty being negotiated right now with countries in the Pacific Rim that the U.S. is leading, and that has been, like ACTA, which you might have heard of before, is negotiated in secret, which is quite unprecedented for copyright treaties. Those are usually done at the UN, which has its own problems, but at the very least we know what they're talking about there. All we know about TPP is what we can get from the leaked documents, and of course they leak like a sieve, because a secret hundreds of people knows is we have a technical word for that. We call it not a secret, right? We've seen just crazy stuff, like 3 strikes and you're out rules, where people get disconnected from the internet if they're accused of 3 acts of copyright infringement. We've seen laptop border searches and ACTA, and probably again in TPP, all kinds of crazy stuff. And some of our worst exports have been to the so-called emerging economies, the post-Soviet economies. So in Russia, as a condition of their entry into the WTO, the World Trade Organization, Russia was strong-armed into passing a copyright law that's, on paper, one of the most stringent in the world. It basically says that you are obliged to prove that any work that you own isn't pirated, not that the state has to prove that it is. And what that has meant is that if there's an opposition newspaper that embarrasses the Kremlin, they can go in and say, prove your Windows isn't pirated. And if you say, well, I have this hologram in the box and the serial number, they say, prove the hologram isn't pirated. And they just keep doing that until you run out of, well, I have the receipt, well, prove the receipt isn't pirated, and eventually they just take away all of your computers and you stop publishing. Right? So we have exported not the First Amendment, but instead we have re-exported Soviet-style censorship to Russia in the form of copyright law. Right? So no, the short answer, we don't. But maybe someday there will be other countries that have better rules. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how to preface this with what do you think.
Okay.
But you mentioned drones a while ago. Alameda County, across the bay, the sheriff there wants his own adorable little drone. It's only 3 feet square. It's got 4 little rotors. It's the cutest thing in the world. There will be a hearing. The first preliminary hearing is a week from today, next Thursday the 14th, Valentine's Day.
Oh, romantic.
We think at 1 o'clock at the Board of Supervisors in Oakland, and everyone is certainly welcome to come. Please do come.
So on 1 o'clock, Board of Supervisors in Oakland, meeting to discuss the plan to add drones to the Oakland Police Department's famed and storied proportional and lawful response to law enforcement. Yes, in the back. Yes, you.
I've had my own experience fighting a multi-billion-dollar corporation about copyright. And so I didn't have the government coming after me, but I had Disney coming after me in a copyright case. Boing Boing was incredibly helpful, as well as the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And I want to encourage everybody here, if you're not a member, I would like you to join personally. And I followed Aaron, his case, very closely, but after he died, suddenly there was this response, it's like after it happened. And I know, because I work with some of these corporations, that they're going to push the next SOPA. And I'd like to know if you have any insight on what it's going to be and what form it's going to come, and if there's anything new that we should be looking for, as well as be prepared to fight.
So I don't know what the next salvo will be, but I know what the response will be, which is the cat signal. So the Internet Defense League has its own cat signal, and it's websites that have agreed to put up a picture of a cute cat and a notice that there's something really bad going on all across the internet. And it's the websites that went dark or put up notices about SOPA and more. And so the next time, we'll all know about it really quickly, and EFF is part of that effort as well.
By the way, I'm Spot.
Oh, hi, Spocko. Nice to meet you. Yes, young man.
You were talking about software that spies on you that's put on mobile devices.
Yeah.
How much of that is put onto your computer that you get normally, like not stuff that's added by your school or company?
So how much spyware is on computers that you get normally? I think not a lot, right? I think that, like sometimes computers inadvertently leak things, or sometimes computers leak things in ways that we might talk about as being like not less than perfect, or something that we wish they wouldn't do, or there's a default on that we don't like. Maybe Firefox ships out of the gate, or Chrome ships out of the gate, so that the Google autocomplete is turned on, so that every time you enter a keystroke into that search box, it's being sent to Google, so Google can do the autocomplete, and without you ever taking an affirmative step to saying, I want all of my searches, even the ones I don't submit, sent to Google before I get a chance to hit return or think better of it. But there isn't a lot of that out of the box with the machines that you buy, but there's a lot of that with the machines that you lease or with the machines that you interact with. What's more, the provision, the inclusion of services that are supposed to hide what the device is doing, and that really is common in almost all shipping consumer laptops and desktop PCs. Those operating systems are designed, unless you're using something like Linux, those operating systems are designed to have some part of them hide what they're doing from you. That facility is available to people who want to write bad software. Now, in Canada, where I'm from, a bunch of business leaders have just asked Parliament for the right to install malicious software on people's computers without their knowledge if they think that those people are violating Canadian law or another national law. So it would actually, it's so badly written that it would allow the Chinese government to infect Falun Gong computers of people who support Falun Gong in Canada, because Falun Gong is illegal in China. And so there's certainly lots of people who think that that would be a good idea. And if I had to put my finger on where the problem comes from, it's that we're used to thinking of complicated devices as being amenable to having features added and removed to them, right? You've got a dishwasher, and the dishwasher has a dry cycle that runs very fast, but it's incredibly energy inefficient, and we put down some energy efficiency rules for appliances, and the people who make the dishwashers have to take that feature out, and they're still dishwashers, right? So we're inclined to think that we can solve problems, but with technology regulation, we say you can or can't have this feature, you must or must not adhere to these characteristics. And since everything we do today involves a computer, all of our problems have a computer in them somewhere, and the intuition is that you can say, well, just make a computer that doesn't do the thing that causes the problem, right? Just remove the problematic feature from the computer, but leave the rest of the computer intact. We don't know how to do that. There is no theoretical model for the computer that runs all the programs, except for the one that makes someone unhappy, right? The closest we have is the I can't let you do that Dave computer. It's a computer with spyware on it that watches everything you do so that it can interdict you when you're doing the bad thing, and that hides the spyware from you because otherwise you just believe it. Yes?
Well, I wanted to ask you about the arms race that's brewing between governments and media companies on the one side and knowledgeable individuals on the other side. Because, for instance, in software, hackers are always finding ways around these security measures, copyright control measures, and they keep responding with even tighter controls. You mentioned drones. Makers are learning how to build their own drones and do all kinds of interesting things with hardware. And now we have 3D printing, which has all kinds of promise. I was wondering where you thought that arms race would end.
So I think, I gave this talk, more or less this talk in, I'm trying to remember if it was in Portland or Seattle this question came about. It was Portland, Seattle. I gave this talk, and someone in the audience said, when I hear you talk about the security stuff, it just scares me witless, because I feel like there's no way I can have the technological savvy to make my computer, my mobile devices secure from this stuff. What do I do? And I said, I don't think you do it. I think we do it, right? I think that it's not enough to say that we have the technology that makes our devices listen to us. It's not enough to say that we can figure out a way to build our own drones. We also have to have policy dimensions. We have to have laws and rules and politicians and systems that make all of this stuff work. It's like going to hear an epidemiologist talk about every waterborne disease and saying, God, how can I build my own septic system and sewage system and water treatment facility to keep me safe from all of those waterborne diseases? What am I going to do? I'm going to die of giardia, right? And the answer to that is that you don't individually solve that problem. That we solve that problem together, because that's the only way we can. I mean, even the most knowledgeable among us can't audit all the source code of all the devices that they use all day. That's like a full-time job and a half. And besides, it's only with many eyeballs that all bugs are shallow, right? So if you audit all your source code, you'll miss stuff. So it's only by all of us working together. And so that's why systemic approaches that aren't just about answering the machine with the machine, but also answering the machine with the policy dimension that says the machine that fixes the machine has to be used, or the machine that breaks the machine can't be used. You know, no more making it illegal to offer a service to unscrew up laptops, right? Like, one of the big problems with laptops being insecure and having all the spyware and the facility for spyware in them is that if you went down to Sand Hill Road to raise venture capital to open a set of shops up and down the country where you could bring your laptop in and they would remove all that junk from it, is that the minute the lawyers looked at it, they would say, well, I'm sorry, you're going to fall afoul of user license agreements, you're going to fall afoul of DMCA and user convention stuff. If you do this, if you offer a jailbreaking service, and so we're not going to fund this, right? And so what we're left with is this thing where each one of us has to figure out individually how to remove the bad stuff from our devices and keep it off of there. If it's legal, then you can have co-ops that do it. You can have courses in it at school. You can have companies that do it. You know, in the UK where I live, phone unlocking, not jailbreaking, but unlocking so you can switch carriers has been legal for a long time. It was legal here for 3 brief shining years when the Copyright Office said that it didn't violate the DMCA. And now it may or may not be legal because they have dropped that exception to the DMCA, and now we just have to find out whether a judge thinks that it is or isn't legal. So there's that zone of uncertainty. But in the UK, it's been legal forever. And when I walk out my door and I walk down to the corner, there's a convenience store where they phone unlock. And then I walk 3 doors over and there's my dry cleaner where they phone unlock. And then I go down into the Tube, which is like our version of BART, and there's a guy with a card table with a sign on it that says phones unlock £5, right? So like, we don't need, you know, so if the question is like, how do I ever figure out how to unlock all the phones I might ever own? The answer is, you make it not illegal to unlock phones, and then everywhere you go, someone will unlock your phone for you.
Or you make it impossible for them to enforce that.
Right. Well, no, I think that it's not enough if it's impossible to enforce the law, because you don't have to enforce the law against everyone. You just have to enforce the law against all the boards of education, so they can never make it an AP comp sci class. You have to enforce it against all of the people who want to, you have to enforce it against all the venture capitalists who are thinking about funding a nationwide chain of, of unlocking and decrapwarifying, kiosks inside Best Buy. I mean, finally a reason for Best Buy, right? It's like, bring me your devices and I will decrapify them, like a Genius Bar that actually does something that you need. That would be great. Maybe 2 more questions, and then I'll deface your property. Yes.
Mine's not really a question so much as a statement on what you think.
Right.
But I just wanted to say that there is hope for this as well. My husband is from Turkey, and one of the biggest businesses there is breaking phones. Mm-hmm. When you can buy a phone from any place in the U.S. You bring it into the country, you can go to any street corner, and there's someone there who can break the phone for you.
Yeah, well, because it's unambiguously lawful.
Well, not really. It's completely illegal.
Is it in Turkey?
It is
Really?
completely illegal.
Oh.
It's just that
They just have no enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. Going to Turkey, I like to call the police officers the fashion police, because that's like, they just stand around with their hands on their hips and their guns
Looking
hanging
cool.
out, and they don't really do anything. So, it's not so much it's legal so much as there's no enforcement, but there is hope for it. And
I agree, although I would prefer a country with good laws that were enforced and then the bad laws get taken off the books, rather than a country where we just assume that the cops are so incompetent or jaded that they don't enforce the laws.
it's true,
Yeah.
but
Okay, last question. Go.
So the European Court of Human Rights this morning ruled that copyright law is a basic infringement of basic human rights. Are you familiar with?
I read a brief article about it, and the article that I read said that that wasn't exactly what they said. They said that in certain circumstances, the human right to free expression is more important than copyright. And then they were very careful in the discussion to say that there are lots and lots of ways in which that's not absolute, and you shouldn't interpret this to mean copyright is less important than free speech. So the European Court of Human Rights was close but no cigar.
Okay. Good. Okay. Do you think that's a step in the right direction, though?
I think it is a step in the right direction. I mean, I think, we've got lots of European countries that have recognized internet access as a human right. I know Windsurf says the internet's not a human right, the things that it delivers are human rights, but to my mind that's a distinction that makes no difference. Martha Lane Fox, who's the champion for digital inclusion in the UK, when she got her job, she got PricewaterhouseCoopers to do the study of what internet access brings to families who have it. And she had this lucky accident because in one of the northern towns where the economy collapsed because all the industry had gone offshore, they had a government housing project, what we call a housing estate or a council block, that had free internet access as part of a pilot program, and then there was a place like next door that didn't. So they had this lab, right, a control and an experiment. And what they found was that the families that had internet access for a couple of years, everything that we think of as being a human right or being a thing that we measure when we measure quality of life had gone up for them. Better nutrition and better health and better education and more access to post-secondary education and more social mobility and just all of it, right? And so for me, when Vince says, oh, well, it's not a human right, it delivers human rights, what I say to him is, okay, what alternative mechanism, when we have these two populations in this controlled experiment, what alternative mechanism do you imagine that will deliver human rights as effectively as the internet? And how does that distinction make a difference? So I do think it's a human right, or as close as makes no never mind. So thank you all. I think